A very warm welcome to everyone who is participating in this webinar series today. I would like to thank God Almighty for giving us this opportunity to conduct this series after a very long time. And also thanks to the CMAI Nurses League for giving us this opportunity to conduct this program from College of Nursing CMC Vellore. So this is going to be a 4-day series on neurological conditions. 2 days it is going to be on stroke, and the other 2 days it is going to be on head injuries. And being a pioneer institute, the neurological department is a very well-known department in the world, and a lot of activities happen in this place. And we have very eminent speakers who are going to lead this webinar series. And one among them is Mrs. Rebecca Sumati Bai, who is here with us, who will take you around in this session today. And we know that it's going to be a very fruitful session, and I wish everyone who's participating a very good learning experience on all these 4 days. Over to Mrs. Rebecca Sumati Bai.
Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you who have gathered here for this webinar. I thank Dr. Vinita and Mrs. Alice Soni for giving us this opportunity to present on the stroke and day after tomorrow, the head injury. From our department, I have with me Ms. Deborah Sneglata, who will also be sharing the session tomorrow. It's very difficult to talk everything about stroke or head injury in 1.5 hours of 2-day session. So we will deal with some basics and some innovative things, and what are the trends in these things that will help us. And mostly we will concentrate on, as nurses, what is required of us. I welcome you all. Please keep your questions jotted maybe at the end of this session, or tomorrow we can conclude with all the queries being helped out. So today's topic is stroke, cerebrovascular accident. That is a common term that we have. Okay, just to introduce the topic, all of us know the definition of stroke, which was given by WHO about 40 years ago, which as rapidly developing clinical signs of focal disturbance of cerebral function lasting more than 24 hours or leading to death with no apparent cause other than that of vascular. It's a big definition, but all of us know it. But then after that, there were many definitions which came. The final one is which was given by American Stroke Association into 2013. And it's a simple definition which says ischemic stroke is defined as an episode of neurological dysfunction caused by focal cerebral, spinal or retinal infarction. Now, why did they include retinal infarction? Because of the transient ischemic attack. We know that many patients who come with TIA will definitely, may have, there are about 60% chance of developing a stroke after TIA. So that is why they've included the retinal infarction. So ischemic stroke is actually characterized by the sudden loss of blood circulation to an area of the brain, maybe a small area or a bigger area, but nevertheless, it will result in loss of neurological function. We will see what are these what are the functions that will be lost. Acute ischemic stroke is caused by thrombotic or embolic occlusion of a cerebral artery, which is more common than hemorrhagic stroke. Ischemic stroke is about 80%, and hemorrhagic stroke is only about 20%. I just want to give you some stroke statistics, international, national. In the global prevalence of stroke in 2017, was 104.2 million people. Out of that, ischemic stroke was 82.4 million, intracerebral hemorrhage 17.9 million, and subarachnoid hemorrhage 9.3 million. This was WHO's data. Again, when you talk about the areas that are affected, the stroke prevalence rates, highest in Eastern Europe, North Africa, Middle East, and Central and East Asia. And if you see the Central and East Asia, intracerebral hemorrhage is very common. And in Eastern Europe and North Africa, it is ischemic stroke. Eastern Europe and Central East Asia also has the highest prevalence rates of ischemic stroke. The prevalence of subarachnoid hemorrhage was highest in Japan. And talking about the mortality, 6.2 million deaths occurred with a total of 2.7 million with acute ischemic stroke, 3.3 million for ICH, and 0.4 million subarachnoid hemorrhage. Look at the India's statistics. We have increased nearly 100%, says Indian Stroke Association. The stroke incidence in India is very high. If you look at the data, 194 to 215 per 100,000 population in rural areas. And whereas in all the other developed countries, there is a 42% of drop in the prevalence. According to Dr. M.V. Padma Srivastava, who is the head of Neurosciences Center, AIIMS, he says stroke is the leading cause of death in northeastern states of India, surpassing cardiac problems and tuberculosis. And it was 12th cause in 1996, but now it has become the 5th leading cause in 2016, which is almost a 100% increase. Now, this is another data that I want to tell you. In Maharashtra, it was found to be 194 in 100,000 population. And in Ludhiana, Punjab, the mortality is almost 210 for 100,000 population. Why is this gap? What is happening? They say that in India, it includes the pre-hospital care, stroke services, thrombolysis, rehabilitation of stroke patients are all, we lack in all those things. And it has become one of the leading causes of morbidity and mortality, and attributing to 30% of the overall morbidity. So it is also estimated that in every 40 seconds, someone suffers from stroke and a person dies of stroke in every 4 minutes globally. The lifestyle changes, adoption of unhealthy habits like lack of physical exercise, smoking, alcohol consumption, new cases of stroke in younger generation, all results in this. Now, even the last year when we had the COVID pandemic, we still had patients coming for stroke, but so much of inconvenience, they were not able to really get their medical services because along with COVID problem. A recent study conducted by University of North Carolina, they have found that poor eating habits, alcohol and smoking, and physical inactivity has been the major contributing factor for stroke. Now, what is this inactivity? It is associated with increase in screen time. When people were isolated, quarantined, the only thing that helps them is the digital world. And as per the study, for every hour of digital screen time, the life expectancy reduces up to 22 minutes. I'm not scaring, but this is the data that has been given. The amount of screen time also has adverse outcomes, including heart attack, stroke, and cancer. Beyond 2 hours, every hour spent in front of the digital screen raises the risk of stroke by 20%. And I'm sorry for that. If you look at this, these are the 6 important risk factors for stroke. We're going to talk a little more about it, but just wanted to show you, starting with high blood pressure, cholesterol, sedentary lifestyle, diabetes, obesity, or physical inactivity, smoking are the real causes for developing a stroke. Coming down to the risk factors, these are the risk factors, as you can see there: high blood pressure, hormonal factors, obesity, inactivity, binge drinking, smoking, previous stroke, TIA, age, family history or ethnicity, heart disease, high cholesterol, diabetes. All these are factors for stroke. All of us know there is something called non-modifiable and modifiable stroke. This picture tells you, this is a study done in, it was written in 2018, and the data given here is the global Indian statistics and United States. And you see there, and it is from 1990 to 2016. If you look at the picture, the red is the Indian thing, and the dietary risk has been the same from 1990 to 2016. The dietary risk has always been high. Tobacco, of course, plays a role. Smoking plays a role in that. So the controlled factors and the non-controlled factors, that is modifiable risk factors and non-modifiable risk factors are there. Of course, non-modifiable, which cannot be controlled by us, are age, sex, heredity, the race, Afro-Caribbean is very less than Asian, and Asian is very less than European. That's how it goes. So those are non-modifiable. You can't do anything much about it. But we can still do something to control the risk factors. The control risk factors, as I said, hypertension, obesity, inactivity, smoking, alcohol consumption, all this can be controlled, and thus we can prevent stroke. Little bit about the anatomy physiology, because unless we understand the basics of anatomy of the arterial circulation, it will be a little difficult for us to understand further the treatment, etc. So here I want to project the two things. All of you are very sure about the circle of Willis. You'd have heard, you'd have read, And in circle of Willis, which is located at the base of the brain, we talk about a variety of arteries, the pairs of arteries, which is the anterior circulation, internal carotid arteries, middle cerebral artery, and then the posterior circulation, which comprises of the basilar artery coming from two vertebral arteries. That's the basics of circle of Willis. Circle of Willis plays a major role in contributing during stroke, by giving extra branches, when needed, the collaterals, and substituting blood supply. Now, in the cerebral arterial circle, there are many arteries that supplies the brain. Brain needs about 15% of blood supply or of the cardiac output. Okay, that's about 750 ml per minute. So these are the arteries. There are different arteries as listed there. The anterior communicating artery, anterior cerebral artery. I will not read the whole list. This slide, this PPT can be used by anyone. So you can actually read about it later also. I will talk about the major arteries: the anterior cerebral artery, anterior communicating artery, basilar artery, middle cerebral artery, internal carotid, and the basilar artery. So these are the arteries that contribute to the blood supply of the brain. Cerebral blood flow. We all know ischemia happens because of either reduced blood supply or there is no blood supply for some reason. So it can, vary. Now, cerebral blood flow has to be 300 ml or 100 ml per 100 grams per minute. Okay. And the gray matter needs about 80 ml of blood per 100 grams per minute. And the white matter needs about 20 ml per 100 grams per minute. So in total, you can say on an average about 50 ml, actually 100 ml, 50 ml per 100 grams or 750 ml per minute is what the brain needs. Now, when there is a reduction in blood supply, that is when it becomes 20 to 25 ml per 100 grams, you can expect a cognitive impairment. in times when if you are catering for neuro patients, patients with any kind of neuro problems, when they become hypoxic, they become confused. When there is less oxygen supply, when there is a problem in the brain, they start confused. They actually go into coma also. So there is cognitive impairment when there is a reduction of blood, when it is less than 20 to 25. When the blood flow reduces to 15 to 20 per 100 grams per minute, then we call it as isoelectric EEG. If you take an EEG at that time, you will see a silent EEG. The electrical activity will be very subtle. You will never be able to identify or elicit a waveform. It will be like a flat line, almost like a flat line, what you see in a heart attack. And if the cerebral blood flow is less than 10 ml per 100 grams, it can lead to irreversible brain damage. So it's very important that brain gets, because brain does not have a store of anything in itself. So it needs glucose and oxygen fresh. So every minute there should be new blood that is coming, supply the oxygen and glucose, and it is taken back. So that is the need for brain. So if the brain is about 1400 grams, you know what will be the blood supply that is needed. So remember, 100 grams, 50 to 100 ml per 100 grams is what the brain needs. So we have to provide that. Going on to the types of stroke. The major types. We all know ischemic stroke and hemorrhagic stroke. And the name itself tells us ischemic is infarction, or there is no blood supply or hypofunctioning area. Hemorrhagic stroke, on the other hand, is because of a rupture of blood vessel, when there is a weak blood vessel, and then blood leaks into the surrounding brain. So these are the two things. But there's one third one called as TIA, which is a temporary stroke which will resolve in about less than 24 hours. So the classification of stroke. Okay. Now, the stroke here is divided into primary ischemic and primary hemorrhagic stroke. So ischemic stroke is further divided into thrombotic and embolic stroke. Embolic is when there is something traveling from a clot or a debris that can travel from one place and blocks the vessel in the brain, can becomes an embolic. And in the primary hemorrhagic, we have intracerebral hemorrhage and subarachnoid hemorrhage. Okay. This is a better classification because it tells us about the vascular system, pathology, site of lesion, etc. So if you look at the vascular system, you can still have an arterial stroke. Now, what we mean by CVA or stroke is most often we talk only about the arterial stroke, which is more than 90%. But there can be a venous stroke also. There are the venous system, there are many venous system, the venous dural sinuses are there. You can still have an infarct. So I'll finish with that and then go to the major arterial stroke. So in the venous, which is less than 1%, infarct can happen secondary to an hemorrhage in the venous system, and we call it central venous thrombosis. So CVT. There are patients who are admitted for various reasons with cortical venous thrombosis, or we call it as cerebral venous thrombosis. And then the treatment differs from the artery. Coming back to the arterial stroke, the pathology can be again infarct and hemorrhage. Infarct is about 85%, hemorrhage is about 15%. The site of lesion, okay? It can be an anterior circulation stroke or a posterior circulation stroke. Remember, I told you the arterial circulation includes the internal carotid artery, external carotid artery, and the anterior cerebral artery. All that, is called as anterior circulation stroke, or you can call it as a carotid circulation stroke. On the other hand, you have posterior circulation stroke, which is mainly like vertebrobasilar circulation, which is about 20%. I will not go into the clinical classification because each stroke association gives a different name. Okay. But then the common pathophysiology for all these things is, it can be an embolism from can be cardiac diseases, it can be atherosclerosis, it can be an emboli, it can be a vascular degeneration, arteriovenous malformation, etc. So this is the general classification of stroke. Now, I want to tell you about this lacuna stroke in the clinical classification. Okay, the third one, if you see, there is total anterior circulation stroke, you have partial anterior circulation stroke and lacuna stroke. Lacuna stroke is not a large vessel stroke, it is a small vessel stroke. The small arteries which are located deep in the brain are called as lacuna stroke. Now that's about 20%, and the treatment of this stroke is actually difficult because of the location of the stroke. Whereas if it's a large artery stroke, the treatment, you can give a thrombolysis, you can give do a mechanical thrombectomy. All those are possible with anterior circulation stroke. Okay, so that is about now the stroke. The pathophysiology. Okay, you have either a thrombus or embolus, which leads to hypoperfusion, and that can lead to ATP depletion. And that whenever there is an ATP depletion, you have ionic membrane or ionic pump failure. That's because of the need of energy. So there is failure of sodium potassium pump, which can lead to membrane depolarization and cytotoxic cellular edema, which again leads to calcium, which is an extracellular component, gets entered into the cells, okay, causing calcium into the cells. And on the other hand, you have glutamate release from the membrane depolarization, also leading to calcium entry, which also will lead to activation of lipid peroxidases and the other organelles, leading to intracellular destruction of the intracellular organelles, release of free radicals. And finally, you have liquefactic necrosis, where the area which is necrosed, the area which is start being destructed, starts becoming a liquid. If you look at this picture, this talks about a whole area of infarct. Now, whenever there is an infarct, we already said you should get about 100 ml of blood per 100 grams per minute. Now, when it is 50 grams also, which is adequate, the brain cells can still function normally. That is called as, there is a normal, there is no need for to worry, because the brain tissue get normal blood supply. But when the blood supply reduces to 20 ml, then that area becomes functionally inactive, but it is structurally intact. That area needs something to be done. But if the blood supply reduces to less than 10 ml, we call it as a core infarct area, or this area is irreversibly injured. You can do nothing for this area to revive. That area is completely dead. So that's the core area. So always around a core ischemic or infarcted area, you have an area which is called as penumbra. Now, all the treatment that we aim is aimed at penumbra, because as I said, the core area is dead and gone. So penumbra has to be revived. Whether you do a thrombectomy, whether thrombolysis are given, the penumbra has to, otherwise what will happen is that area also will become like a core area. If you see this picture again, the same thing. I just want to reiterate on what I said in the previous slide. If it is 60 to 50 ml of blood per minute, you can still have, it's a normal cerebral blood flow, but you need 20 ml of blood at least for the synaptic transmission. If you want the nerve impulses to be transmitted appropriately, at least 20 ml should be there. Anything less than 20 ml will cause reversible damage, suboptimal function, and that will lead to penumbra. But if the blood flow is less than that, it will lead to irreversible damage. Okay. And why do we say it is so important that we have to treat them? Because you see a picture here, Okay, it's just a representation. This is not a real picture or anything. Okay, so you have a black core area and you have a large penumbra which can be revived. You do something to it, this penumbra will become normal. Okay, so in 30 minutes you have a small core and a big penumbra. If you don't do anything, in 2 hours time or less than that, the core becomes big and the penumbra is becoming less. All the penumbra is also start dying and the core is becoming big. But about after some time, after a few hours, you can see the whole area becomes a core, so the brain damage will be more. So this is representation for infarct core and penumbra. Um, so how do you identify a stroke? Okay, all of us know FAST. Now they've included BFAST. For the past few years, we are talking about BFAST. What is BFAST? This sudden loss of balance. B is balance. Okay. Why did they include B? Because initially we were only talking about FAST, which is facial droop, sudden arm, or sudden speech, slurring of speech, etc. But then the basilar part of it was kind of ignored. So this BE is because of the posterior circulation. When you have a vertebro-basilar stroke or you have a posterior circulation stroke, patients will complain of nystagmus, balance, they will have ataxia, etc. So sudden loss of balance. E is sudden loss of vision in one or both eyes. Okay, we will talk about the symptom a little later. F is uneven facial face. That is, you ask them to either say E or smile, there will be an uneven smile or there is a facial droop on one side. Sudden arm weakness. You ask them to stretch out their hands, you will find one arm is being weak. Then they have slurred speech or trouble speaking. So this is called as BFAST, BEFAS, and T stands for to tell us the time is critical. Anytime when we talk about stroke, there is something called a window period. A window period is within this time you have to reach the hospital and something has to be done. Otherwise, the disability will be more. So to prevent that, to prevent all these things, we are talking about time is critical. So this is how. So anytime when we identify something like this, any one of this, any one or two of these symptoms, then we must know it could be a stroke and rush to hospital. The ambulance number we know, so I put that ambulance number there. So time is critical. That is what BFAST stands for. Before we understand about stroke, as nurses, we also should know what are the disabilities that can happen because of a stroke. So I want to spend little more time on the symptoms of stroke. So before we see what are the symptoms, we should know what are the areas of the brain and their functions. So I may not read out every word here, but I just want to touch every lobe and explain. Let's take frontal lobe. Okay, frontal lobe is mainly for intelligence and judgment. We can say higher mental functions. All the cognitive functions are related to frontal lobe, like logic, decision making, judgment, behavior, personality, memory, short-term memory, all that is related to frontal lobe. So if frontal lobe, if there's going to be a stroke or an ischemic area in the frontal lobe, you sure expect a cognitive impairment in these patients. Coming down to temporal lobe, which is responsible for speech and behavior, memory and emotions, vision and hearing, because the Wernicke's area is situated in the temporal lobe, aphasia may be very common. Okay, then you have the occipital lobe, which is responsible for vision, parietal lobe, which is responsible for coordination and sensations, so cerebellum for balance, coordination, and fine muscle movement. So these are the broad areas and functions. Brainstem, which comprises the midbrain, pons, and medulla, is very, we all know that it is a vital area and is responsible for blood pressure, breathing, heartbeat, swallowing. Stroke can affect that area also, and we will see what are the symptoms that we can have. So this is a slide which tells you about the artery and the territory that is being supplied. Okay, anterior cerebral artery supplies medial, frontal, and parietal cortex. Okay, and some white matter. Middle cerebral artery supplies lateral, frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal cortex, and some white matter. Coming down to the basilar artery branches, you have posterior cerebral artery, which supplies the occipital lobe and the temporal cortex. So if you remember the artery which supplies which area, we will be able to easily identify what problem the patient has, and that can be sorted out. Of course, when we as nurses, we don't diagnose, but we must know what artery is involved, and so what could be the problem and how do we help the patient is very, very important. It is not for diagnosis, but it is for to help the patient come out in a better way. So these are the potential impairments that can happen from stroke according to the brain areas. So if you remember the activities or the functions of frontal lobe, you will easily correlate with the problems that can happen. So in frontal lobe, again, you can have loss of simple movement of body parts, loss of sequencing, loss of spontaneity in interaction. You can have Broca's aphasia, which is motor aphasia. The person is able to hear, understand, but the person is not able to talk back or converse appropriately. So similarly, temporal lobe, you can have Wernicke's area, and in brainstem, the person complains of swallowing, vertigo, sleep apnea, insomnia, and occipital lobe, vision will be affected. If it is cerebellum, there will be ataxia, and if it is parietal lobe, you have all the problems like agraphia, alexia. Alexia is difficult reading, okay, difficulty in calculating, difficulty in inability to attend to more than one object at a time, difficulty drawing objects, all these problems. So these are the symptoms after a stroke. Okay, so the warning sign is the be fast. You see a person in the community with the be fast, one of the symptoms or two of the symptoms, it must really strike that this could be a stroke. But when the patient comes to the hospital, we do a lot of more physical examination and identify what are the other problems that this patient has. So that way we will be able to help them appropriately. Even if you don't remember anything at all, remember this is a very brief narration, but if it is anterior cerebral artery, patient will have contralateral hemiparesis. That is the opposite side, which is leg more than any anterior cerebral artery, the patient will have leg weakness. If it's middle cerebral, MCA stroke, we call it middle cerebral artery stroke, you can have contralateral hemiparesis, face and arm more than leg. Left middle cerebral artery, which is very common. Left MCA stroke is a common thing. Patients will land up with aphasia. Internal carotid artery, patient will have amaurosis fugax, which is monoocular blindness. One eye, they will have blindness. And vertebral and basilar arteries, they will have diplopia, dysarthria, dysphagia, vertigo, gait imbalance, and weakness. Now that was about an ischemic stroke. Coming down to hemorrhagic stroke, which is not so common like an ischemic stroke. This is like a bleeding. You have an hemorrhagic stroke patient coming. They may not be even in a position to talk. They will be either already they'll be in coma, or when they come they're already unconscious, or if they are conscious, they complain of severe headache. There'll be progressive deterioration, vomiting because of intracranial pressure, neck stiffness from meningeal irritation, and they will have bilateral Babinski signs, coma, and arm and leg hemiparesis. These are the symptoms of hemorrhagic stroke. So it will be easy for us to identify a person or take care of a person if we know what kind of a stroke and what are we going to do. Of course, the treatment and all the other things will be dealt by Ms. Deborah. So I will not touch that part of it. I will only restrain myself to this particular thing. Now, brainstem strokes. This is also, it happens. About 20% of patients come with lacuna stroke. All the arteries, the basilar artery, that's a bigger artery, but you have artery which supplies the thalamus, arteries which supplies the basal ganglia. The small arteries can cause stroke. Now, what are these specific strokes are? Wallenberg syndrome. Now, Wallenberg syndrome is also called as lateral medullary syndrome. Medulla oblongata, you can see a picture there, and that picture shows one red arrow mark and shows the medullary infarct. If you have ischemia of the medulla oblongata, you call it as Wallenberg syndrome. And the problem here or the symptoms here will be ipsilateral loss of pain and temperature on the face. They will not have any pain sensation, and they will also have contralateral loss of pain and temperature on the body part. Okay, they can have Horner syndrome, vertigo, and slurred speech. This is an exceptional syndromes, what I'm talking. Next comes in the Logden syndrome. Logden syndrome is because of a pontine lesion. There's a second picture shows you the pons varoli. If you have the ischemia, if there is an ischemia of the pons, then the patient will land up with Logden syndrome. Now, Logden syndrome, remember, patient cannot move, patient cannot speak, patient can only blink. Horizontal movement of eye movement only will be there. So that is why it's called as Logden syndrome. This is a kind of stroke. Then you have Weber syndrome, which is stroke of the midbrain. These are not very common, but it happens. It happens, and it is good for us to know what are the specific brainstem strokes. Finally, coming to the TIA, or called as mini stroke, okay, transient ischemic attack. This occurs when there is a temporary lack of blood flow and causes stroke-like symptoms that resolve within 24 hours. Patient goes to bed, all right, he has his lunch, he has his dinner, he or she they have their dinner, goes to bed, and then wakes up with some symptoms. Can't speak, can't get up from bed, or has some eye problem, vision, could be a TIA, or we call it as wake up stroke. Wake up stroke is you go to bed normally, then when you wake up, you have some symptoms. So it could be either a TIA or a wake up stroke. Many people ignore the symptom, and then they will say it may be because loss of sleep, or I did not sleep well, or I dreamt like this, that's why like this, we'll wait. No, you should not wait. Immediately when a symptom is like that, immediately it is better to reach a hospital for further evaluation. Unlike a stroke, a mini stroke on its own does not cause permanent ability. Okay? It will resolve within 24 hours. But both symptoms of mini stroke and the stroke, complete stroke, are nearly identical. You will never be able to say this is TIA or that is stroke. Symptoms are identical. Patient will all symptoms have symptoms like stroke only. The causes of TIA include hypertension, atherosclerosis, carotid artery disease, diabetes, and high cholesterol, the same as the stroke. And the most common symptoms of a mini stroke are dysphasia, language disorder. They will not be able to talk. It's either difficulty in talking, difficulty in naming, difficulty in understanding, their slurring, dysarthria, or, they will not be able to speak at all. So that's a common thing. And they also have visual problems, either one eye or two eyes. They have vision changes, confusion, balance issues, tingling, altered level of consciousness, dizziness, passing out, severe headache, abnormal sense of taste, abnormal sense of smell, weakness or numbness, or the right or the left side of the face, and all that. The treatment includes for TIA, drug therapy, lifestyle modification, carotid endarterectomy, and stent placement. It is very, very important. I would like to reinforce to say that TIA is a mini stroke, but everyone who had a TIA should have a warning that in future there is always a chance for them to develop a stroke. What are the investigations in acute stroke? Instead of saying what are the investigations, I thought I will tell you this way so we can actually rationalize and understand more about it. First of all, when a patient comes to the emergency department with stroke, you know, uh, we collect the history and a physical examination will be done. And then you ascertain that this is stroke. Now, once you decide this is going to be a stroke, the first question that you have to ask is it a vascular lesion? Okay. Now, when you say, is it a vascular lesion, whether it is, whether any blood vessel is involved in it. Because I'm going to show you another slide which talks about the stroke mimics. The stroke mimics actually patient when they have the stroke mimics, it will be just exactly like a stroke. So you must first of all find out whether this is a stroke or not. So you find out, is it a vascular lesion? So you have to do a CT and MRI. Even before the blood tests are being done, the first investigation that a patient needs is CT or MRI. Now, in the Western countries, you have the ambulance, when a patient is picked by the ambulance workers or the healthcare workers who are in the ambulance will immediately do all these things, and then they stabilize the patient and call the hospital and call the hospital and inform them that they are bringing a patient with stroke. They already do that. So when they come to the hospital, everything is ready for them. The lab is ready, the radiology room is ready, everything is kept ready. Now in India, we have not so much reached that state. So we have to get the first thing that has to be done for a patient is investigation, which is CT or MRI. Now not all hospitals will have an MRI, but at least a CT should be done. The next question that we have to ask is it an ischemic lesion or an hemorrhagic lesion? It is very important that we determine whether it's ischemia or hemorrhage. Only when we know that, we can thrombolize the patient. If you go ahead and thrombolize a patient with hemorrhage, we are going to cause a lot of problem. Patient will die. So we have to find out whether it's an ischemia or hemorrhage. Again, we have to do a CT and MRI. So for both these reasons, whether it is a vascular lesion, is it an ischemia or hemorrhage? For these two questions, the investigations that are appropriate are CT and MRI. Okay. And I have some more things to say about CT. When I finish this slide, I will tell. Is it a subarachnoid hemorrhage? No. Most often, patient would have had a head injury. Patient would have fallen into the bathroom the previous day at home, or some kind of and they would have developed some kind of hemorrhage. It could be an SDH or it could be an EDH. It could be a subarachnoid hemorrhage. Even then, we have to do a CT and then finalize whether it's hemorrhage or not. Is there any cardiac source of embolism? How will we know? We'll have to do an ECG, an echocardiogram, what we call it as TTE or TEE. I'll tell about it little later. What is the underlying vascular disease? Okay, we have to do a duplex ultrasound of carotids or an magnetic resonance in angiography or a CT angiography or a contrast angiography. So CT or CTA is also an important technique when we talk about stroke. In our hospital, we do CT and CTA, and MRI also is being done, which is DWI weighted radiography that we do to identify what is the lesion, where is the lesion, all that will be told in MRI. Now, what are the risk factors you want to know? You have to then check the full blood count, cholesterol, blood glucose, ESR, clotting time, D-dimer, all that will come later. So the first investigation for a stroke patient who comes into the hospital is CT, not doing a blood sampling or doing any lumbar puncture or anything. Do a CT, identify whether it's a vascular lesion, identify whether it's an hemorrhage or an ischemia, and proceed further. So a CT scan, why do we do a CT scan? It is a mandatory initial investigation. Every hospital, a secondary hospital or a tertiary hospital will have a CT facility. So even if there is no MRI or even if there is no facility for anything else, we still have a CT scan. We can do a CT scan, and that is what is advised or recommended by WSO, that is the World Stroke Organization, or American Stroke Organization, Indian Stroke Organization. Any stroke organization or association recommends a mandatory CT scan when the patient enters the hospital, because hemorrhage appears instantly as an hyperdense area. You can immediately see hemorrhage when you do a CT scan. So then you know this patient is not a candidate for thrombolizing. Okay. And if you see an infarct which appears as an hypodense area, you can say, okay, this patient needs thrombolysis. This is what doctors decide when a CT is being done. But sometimes infarct may not appear before 48 hours. We've had one patient, one or two patients years back. Now we have learned the lesson, and the algorithm is there, and we also have improved a lot in the stroke management. I'm talking about few years back. Patient comes into the hospital, CT is normal, patient was sent back home, and then symptoms worsen, patient comes back to the hospital, take a CT, you find an infarct. That can happen. So CT, infarct may not appear. So we have to be a little careful. Instead, MRI can be done, okay, but CT is more sensitive for detecting hemorrhage. So as I said, diffusion weighted MRI is good for identifying any ischemic lesion. So nowadays in CMC hospital, though we have a CT facility, we have MRI stroke protocol. Any patient who comes with stroke symptoms will be taken for MRI, and straight away MRI is done, and then they identify, and then sometimes we even thrombolize in MRI room itself, to be quick. So this is how a lesion, a ischemic lesion will appear on a CT, a hypodense lesion. And in an CT, the blood will look, bright color as a hyperdense area. You can see the white thing. Okay. So this CT scan or MRI is the best modality for identifying stroke. So we have to be, why do we do a stroke? Is because of the stroke mimics. If a patient comes with seizure or in the post-ictal area, patient will be limp, not talking, drowsy, okay, or hemiplegic migraine, subdural hematoma, intracranial abscess, intracranial tumors, multiple sclerosis, hypertensive encephalopathy. All these conditions also patient will exactly present like stroke symptoms. So these are the CNS stroke mimics. You can also have metabolic conditions, hypoglycemia, hepatic encephalopathy. These patients will also have similar symptoms like stroke or psychiatric issues or miscellaneous like facial nerve palsy, radial nerve palsy. All these are called as stroke mimics. So when a patient comes into the emergency department, whoever is attending to the patient, the neurologist or a neuro nurse, whoever it is, must identify correctly whether it is real stroke or it's a stroke mimic. They also call it as chameleons. Chameleons are nothing but the syndromes. I mentioned some syndromes. So that is chameleon, which will present exactly like stroke. So when we know if it is a stroke mimic, they will not get the thrombolysis. But if it is not a stroke mimic, it is a stroke, then they will get the actual treatment. Okay, so these are called as the stroke mimics. So as I was telling you, we have to find a history is very important. The first 10 minutes, as much as possible, we must collect correct history. When was the patient last all right? When was he, whether he went for work, when he came back after work, how was he talking? No, that will tell us the onset of symptoms. So to thrombolize a patient, we have to thrombolize before 4.5 hours. The window period was 3 hours some years back, but now they've increased the time to 4.5 hours. So within that hours, we should do the IV thrombolysis should be given. So for that, we have to collect the correct history, and correct symptoms has to be identified. Physical examination, we use a scale called NIHSS. I'll show you it. And that has to be done quickly. And then we have to say what is correctly the patient's presentation. Now, TEE is transesophageal echocardiography and TTE is transthoracic echocardiography. These two are used to identify if there are any cardiac diseases. Usually atrial fibrillation, endocarditis, these are the cardiac diseases that can lead to stroke and, commonly. So we must identify all that, do a transcranial Doppler to see which vessel is affected and what is the blood supply. These are other modalities that we can use. But again, I want to reiterate saying in the first 3 hours after a suspected CVA, cerebrovascular accident, a non-contrast CT is the gold standard for diagnosis of acute hemorrhagic stroke. Then comes the blood test and all the other tests. So this is NIHSS. This is done in the emergency department itself. We don't take so much time. You have 11 components there and the total score is 0 to 42. 42 is the maximum score, 0 is the minimum score. They have now many scales have come in the last year. That is NIHSS made EC, which has a score of 10, NIHSS, which has a score of 15, 20, 25, etc. But this is the original scale that was designed, which has 42 marks, And what do we see is level of consciousness. Then you have some questions, level of consciousness questions, level of consciousness commands. You look at the best gaze. You move your hands and then see what is the best gaze. Visual fields, facial palsy, left motor arm, right motor arm, left motor leg, right motor leg, limb ataxia, sensory, best language, dysarthria, and extinction and inattention. So these are the 11 aspects that we check in NIHSS. Everyone should be trained. Anyone who works in the neurological field, whether it's a neurologist or a neuro nurse or anyone, should be trained or certified for NIHSS to do this, because you need to really quickly do it without wasting too much of time, so that the other part of the treatment will not be delayed. And this will tell you the severity of the score. Now, the BFAST, that is the warning symptoms of stroke, will tell you whether it is stroke or not. But NIHSS will tell you how severe is the stroke, okay? Because it is very important for us to know whether can you do something at all. If it is 0, I said no stroke symptoms. And if the score is between 1 to 4, it's a minor stroke. 5 to 15, it's moderate stroke. 16 to 20, it's moderate to severe stroke. And 21 to 42 is severe stroke. Now, in a severe stroke, there are, whatever you do, it is going to be very less beneficial to the patients. So to know the severity of stroke, we use the NIHSS score. There's one more scale which I did not present here, MRS. If needed, I will show you. It's called Modified Rankin Scale. That will also tell you what is the disability of the patient after treatment. So this is National Institute of Health Stroke Scale, which is commonly used by everyone worldwide. Now, this is another score which I wanted to show you, which is called as Rosier scale. It is the explanation is, or the expansion is, recognition of stroke in the emergency room. That's all. Okay, so here you have components like, has there been loss of consciousness or syncope? Has there been seizure activity? Has there been a new acute onset facial weakness, arm weakness, leg weakness, speech disturbance, visual field deficit? So if it is yes, you give +1, and if it is no, you give 0, and then you calculate your score, and that will tell you whether it is a stroke or not. Okay, we are not using this thing. It is there in the, it's being used by some people. There are many scales which I did not show you. You have ABCD Squires scale is there, which will tell you whether the presence of cardiac diseases have caused the stroke, to identify that. So that is also there. I want to take you through this slide, which is called as door to needle time. Um, the Indian Stroke Association or worldwide WHO, they have said the person who's a victim of a stroke should get the thrombolysis in less than 60 minutes time, within 60 minutes. That is why it's called as door to needle time. Now, what is this door to needle time? Patient comes to the hospital in the 0 hours or 0 minutes, and then in less than 10 minutes, all evaluation should be completed, including patient history, the physical examination, NIHSS, lab work, everything has to be finished in less than 10 minutes. And in less than 15 minutes, patients, the neurologic expert should come and they will also do their evaluation. In less than 25 minutes, a CT has to be taken. A CT or an MRI or a CTA, whichever is applicable, should be done. And in less than 45 minutes, interpretation of the CT should be done, and a decision to give injection thrombolysis should also be taken. You look at the eligibility criteria, which Deborah will be talking about, and in less than 60 minutes, we must give the Actylyse injection or the thrombolysis. And that is how it is useful. Any injection, any thrombolysis that is done within 60 minutes is very effective. And we have seen you can see a dramatic improvement in the patient who comes with a stroke. You give Actylyse, you can see the resolving of symptoms. Patient becomes all right without any worsening. So this is called as the door to needle time, that is less than 60 minutes. So if you go through the algorithm, okay, a patient comes to stroke. So this is the algorithm that we also use. All suspected acute stroke with the onset less than 3 hours comes to the emergency department. You triage the person and you do the clinical evaluation. Then stroke code is activated. And as soon as the stroke code activation is done, you can, on one side, you can have the blood test being done, and then the CT room gets ready for a CT to be done. The neurologist does the history here in our hospital. It is the nurse who does all the NIHS assessment, and then CT is interpreted. And we have to check if the person is a candidate for IVTPA. If the candidate is a candidate for IVTPA, if it is yes, go ahead and give IVTPA, that is tissue plasminogen activator. If the candidate is not eligible, then we shift them for standard stroke care. So this is the stroke algorithm. And we have to remember, in an acute ischemic stroke, the window period is less than 4.5 hours, where you can give intravenous thrombolysis with tissue plasminogen activator. If the patient comes after 4.5 hours, that's an arbitrary number, when we say 4.5 hours. So if the patient comes afterwards, 4.5 to 6 hours, we can go ahead and give intra-arterial thrombolysis with the same drug with an increased dosage. In IV TPA, we give 0.9 milligrams. In intra-arterial thrombolysis, we give 0.2 milligrams. And if it is more than 6 to 8 hours, can do a mechanical thrombectomy. So this is the management. I won't go into the depth of management because we have Deborah talking to us about it. But in this the first portion of the stroke, if you have any doubts, we can discuss. I've given enough time, about 20 minutes, so that we can interact with each other, ask questions, and see if I can answer your questions.